Joining me today on the Capitol Show, Lieutenant retired Colonel Anthony Shaffer. He was the National Security Advisor at Trump campaign for 2020. Anthony, my first question is regarding the election. So how do you evaluate the polls until now? How do you see, what is your analysis of the election process so far?
So I think the fact that the Democrat Party had to abandon 14 million voters, that is the number that Biden approximately received during the primaries, is very telling of the fact that uh, the they abandoned any appearance of democracy. Since they always talk about democracy, it's not democracy. Kamala Harris did not receive a single vote, and she's been appointed to be the candidate for president by the Democrat Party. So that's the first thing.
Mm,
And even George Clooney in comments over the weekend at the time of taping said
mm,
that, oh, it's no big deal. George said that Biden sacrificed himself for a greater good. So I don't know how that's democratic. It's like he won. He won 14 million votes. And somehow, yeah, we're never mind. So I think that's the first issue that people need to be aware of. Secondly,
mm,
as we move towards November now, I don't believe the polls. I think that many of the polls are oversampling Democrats probably between 3 to 5 percent more than Republicans or independents. And I think that's why you see the shift in the polls. You
mhm.
can't go from being the most unpopular vice president with an approval rating lower than Biden's. Think about that. She was lower than Biden to, oh, she's
Suddenly she
she's
is up.
she's wonderful. Yeah, it's there's only so much propaganda can do to raise the profile of a candidate. So I
Mm.
don't buy it. And plus,
Yeah.
even if you look at their polls, she's lower in percentage against Trump than Hillary Clinton. We saw how that turned out. So even if you say, okay, the polls are real, if you
Mm,
compare the numbers to the Hillary Clinton numbers at this time back in 2016, it's still not good. So
mm,
I'm very skeptical. And the most telling thing that
mm,
I've seen is that there was no bump out of the convention. Normally, candidates get a bump of 3 to 5% coming out of their convention. There was nothing. As a matter of fact, I think the Harris campaign did things to mitigate any potential for it by their own mistakes.
yeah.
Everything from uh, basically just calling people out, calling the Gold Star families out for asking Trump to go to
Mm,
to Arlington National Cemetery, to some of the stupid things that Tim Walz does. So
mm,
I think they've done damage to their own effort, and I think it's going to continue.
mm. How do you see the endorsement of RF Kennedy for President Trump in Arizona?
Huge,
Huge.
huge.
And how do you, Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, VP Vance, all these people who they seem to be the one to save America. How do you see the image, the picture of this election?
They do. Well, if you recall that Vance was actually a critic of Trump at one point too. He actually was not a friend of President Trump, and he's come around and said, "I made a mistake. I think it's important to support Trump." I know Tulsi Gabbard. I was advising Tulsi when she was still a Democrat,
Mhm,
and I consider Tulsi a friend. And I texted her. I said I thanked her for endorsing President Trump because she is an independent who left the Democrat Party,
mm,
recognizes the damage that has been caused by her party, former party,
mm,
and what would be caused if it continues.
mm.
And
Lately, Tulsi Gabbard warned Trump that to not underestimate Kamala Harris in the
right.
debate. Do you have any point of view here?
Well, the ability to manipulate is already very apparent. For example,
Mm.
I mentioned a second ago, and I want to get back to Kennedy. Don't let me forget that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I did this last weekend when Kamala Harris attacked President Trump for politicizing Arlington cemeteries. Like, no, no, no. He was invited, as were you. So the more you see where she's trying to create opportunities to create a perception of Trump's bad. That's what the potential is. I don't think Harris is competent. I think she's not bright. but it doesn't change the fact that she knows how to politically manipulate things. For example, when she debated Vice President Pence, I'm speaking. It's like if you watch that
Yeah.
tape,
Yeah.
Pence is sitting there looking at her like, what? It's like, I'm not saying anything. Well, I'm
Mhm.
speaking.
Lots of drama.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So
Mm,
that's what she was hoping for. But back to Kennedy. So I've met RFK. As a matter of fact, I met him going through security at the White House back in 2019. He was going during the first Trump White House to meet President Trump. I was actually walking through. I spoke to him briefly. So these people coming around, it didn't happen overnight. There's
mm,
been a dialogue between President Trump and Tulsi. Tulsi and Trump used to talk about Syria back when she was a Democrat. Kennedy used to talk with Trump about vax issues when he was still president. So I think these things have been investments on both sides on the concepts of what Kennedy feels is important as well as Trump. So these things have been iterative, and
mm.
I think now they're paying off and they're coming together. So I think it's very important that
It's
those who feel that the Democrat Party abandoned them have a place to go. So
Yeah. Tim Walz lately claimed that President Trump wants to bring back child labor. What evidence does he have?
none. It's he referenced basically the 2025 concept, which is like, no.
Mm,
One thing I just personally, I would like to see them add the 2025 concept, free vaccines. I mean,
mm,
sorry, free vasectomies for progressive men. If you're a Democrat and a man, you should get a free vasectomy. Just saying, I think it'd be very useful. But
mm,
I digress. I
mm,
think that there's no evidence of that. As a matter of fact, the only place that there's evidence of massive use of child labor is a
mm,
place called Central African Republic, where they have kids who are 8, 9, and 10 years old, literally out in the fields mining
mm,
lithium and cobalt.
mhm,
So, why are they doing that? Well, they're mining lithium and cobalt for the Green New Deal
mhm,
because you can't mine here. You can't. It's against the law to mine in the United States. So you're not going to have mining concerns here. And so what they've done is they've created conditions for third world nations to
mhm,
bear the brunt
mm.
of the need for raw earth minerals, these rare earth minerals. So
Yeah.
you literally the left has engaged in child labor
Mm,
by creating this global market,
mm.
huge market
Yeah. Yeah.
for cobalt. So,
Yeah.
and it's them. It's them. They've done that, not the
Yeah,
Republicans.
with the open border also, how do you see in the same subject, like JF Kennedy joined Make America Great Again with his
Right,
slogan, Make America Healthy Again. So how do you
right.
see Trump's policy inside the state, the reforms that he gonna do, his agenda for 2024 if he wins? And on the other side, in foreign policy, what would you advise him to do?
Well, the border is an issue that I think those who are traditionally on the left understand. If you have overwhelming and continuous cheap labor coming in, the value of a unit of labor
Mhm,
goes down. So you're not helping unions. Over the weekend, Kamala Harris and Biden were talking about the importance of unions.
mm,
They're doing everything they can to dismantle unions. The unions today depend on a number of economic sectors to be
mm,
successful. One of them is cars. Well, if they get their Green New Deal, most electric cars are going to be made in China, which just eviscerates the UAW, the United Auto Workers. And also, just in labor in general, if you have illegal aliens here willing to work at one quarter the cost of a U.S. citizen, then you're devaluing the market. You're eliminating jobs for Americans. So uh, Bernie Sanders used to know this and talk about it. Now he's been bought out. So that's
yeah,
the first thing. That's going to end. You can't have unrestricted labor coming in that devalues the value of a unit of 1 hour, 1 unit of however you want to measure it.
yeah,
Healthy.
mm,
The issue of big vacs, of big companies. Biden always says we beat big pharma. No, they didn't. They enriched big pharma. Big pharma has made more money from this administration than any other administration in history,
mm,
and they've done it through COVID. They've done it through playing games with the cost of prescription drugs for seniors.
mm,
They are being enriched, and this whole idea that we're dropping costs. No, you're rearranging the costs so people don't observe them. And I
Mm,
think Kennedy will work with Trump to make sure that the people are given a fair shot at drugs they need. And the other thing is, Big Pharma wants people on drugs. Most people, I don't think, need the number of drugs they have. It's a
mm,
way of getting people hooked. And the best, I think, uh, remedy for health is being healthy. Because
exactly.
you avoid overeating, you have a healthy lifestyle. These things don't require drugs. So I think those are the things that. And if you look at Kennedy, look at Kennedy. I mean, he's a healthy guy for 70 some
Yeah,
years old. So
himself, of course. He
yeah.
looked great.
So and then but on national security,
Yeah.
I think I was one of the advisors to the Trump administration. I advised Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Joe Dunford and Mike Pompeo when he was over at CIA and State Department too.
Mm,
And I would advise the current administration to go back to what they were doing before, basically being clear on policy, saying we're not going to be a bully. We want to be your friend. We want to trade. We want to create conditions for success that we
mhm.
can trade, but don't do things to disrupt our neighbors or our friends,
Yeah, exactly.
and and be fair. So, and I think he would. I think they will end the conflict with Ukraine. I think there's some issues there that would be resolved quickly. I don't think Iran would continue to benefit from the money that it gets through sanctions relief
Mm-hmm.
or freeing up of funds. I think they would defund Iran's ability
Mm-hmm.
to fund terror, and I think they would take seriously their threat of creating a weapon, nuclear
Yeah.
weapon that would be usable. So those are the things I
How
think they would do.
Of course, how much President Trump believe in protecting his allied in the Middle East, especially from the Iran Terrorism Act
Yeah,
in the region? How much he has to fix what the damage made by the Biden administration damage these relations? What do you think about his perspective toward, let's say, KSA, United
yeah,
and the United Arab Emirates also. So
right.
these two countries are important in fighting terrorism.
Of
There is a
course, of
collaboration.
course.
How do you see that?
So I see it as very practical. So the way that the Trump administration moved forward with working to normalize commercial and diplomatic relationships was through the Abraham Accords.
Mm-hmm.
We also worked with the Egyptians and Saudis on a military version of that called the Gulf and Red Sea Treaty Organization. It was basically an Arab NATO. So we were working with Bud McFarlane before he passed, gosh, rest his soul. We, Bud and I, were working with Mike Pompeo with the Pentagon to try to find a way to solidify relationships with the Sunni, with the Sunni Arabs, with
Mm-hmm.
UAE, with the Saudis, with the Gulf states, and because they, like we, saw Iran as a threat to regional stability.
Yeah.
And so I think we would return to that as a theme. And I think one of the things that Biden did, which was terrible, is he alienated the Saudi allies early on. Uh, I'm not here to judge what the Saudis did or did not do regarding some of their expatriates. It's not my job to do that.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, the Saudis have always been one of our closest allies, as have the Egyptians. I spent time in Egypt right after and back in 2013, and I think we have a number of nations which we can work to regularize both commercial trade as well as diplomatic exchanges, which will solidify the Gulf states and make it a solid front with the Israelis against Iran and what they may be trying to do regarding nuclear weapons and regional stability.
Mhm. Before to ask you about Israel war or the crisis between and the war in Gaza, there is a critical situation concerning Sudan's stability. So we can see that
Right.
Russia is providing weapons to the Sudanese army. So
Right.
Iran is benefiting from the war in
Of
Sudan.
course.
How we can, since you are a national security advisor, how we can solve the situation in Sudan and stop the influence and the expanding revolution, Iranian revolution, as they call
Yeah.
it.
Well, Sudan has been a problematic nation for a while, as you probably know. Back in the early 2000s, we worked to create a second separate nation, South Sudan,
Mm,
from larger Sudan, which is Christian. And this has been an issue that we've worked. Heck, I've worked with a number of nations. Mali, we worked with Mali. We've worked with Gabon. We've been all over the place, and I think that's the engagement we were doing was
mm,
effective. The Biden administration's abandoned that engagement. There's no longer a cohesive engagement. As a matter of fact, some of the places we had special operations forces advising governments were told to leave. And the reason that they were told to leave is because the U.S. forces started trying to interfere with local politics. That's not our job.
mm,
Our job is not to tell the local government how to run, oh, you're not doing enough woke activities for girls. It's like, that's not our job. Our job is to do counterterrorism. And under the Trump administration, they were only there to stop terrorists. They weren't there to engage in social issues. And
mhm,
so that's why the military has been asked to leave. And I think the same in Sudan. It's like we should be working with elements in Sudan
mm.
who are anti-terror and find a way to stabilize things. That's the only way you're going to be successful. You cannot preach to people who don't want to be preached to, and otherwise you're going to have the Iranians come in and do
Mm.
things which you're not going to like. So I think that's the way to get back to doing that is working at the local level with a lot of these nations, helping them build strong counterterrorism forces.
Yeah, Tony, I'm quoting you now. You said more failure on display, highlighting the complete incompetence of Kamala Harris' team. Iran created conditions for Hamas success with
They did.
cash Biden-Harris gave them once the 7 October Hamas attack happened. They ignored the Americans held hostage. What is the solution of this crisis, in your opinion?
So, well, as I've said publicly several times, they should never have opened the spigots
Mhm,
of the billions of dollars to Iran. That was a huge mistake. The moment you give a terrorist state money, they're going to use it for terror. It's kind of like self-apparent. Secondly, uh, once the mistake was made, they doubled down on failure. Instead
mhm,
of allowing for the Israelis to go do what is necessary to defeat Hamas, they've held them back. And not only did they held them back, they ignored the U.S. hostages. There's been at least between 5 and 10, I don't know if we still know the number, U.S. hostages held within the number of hostages that were taken on the 7th of October. There's
mhm,
not a word been said. And despite the fact that I know that U.S. Special Operations Forces have wanted to go in and try to grab folks to rescue them,
mhm,
the Biden administration has not wanted that. They won't let that happen. And I think as a result, you see this continued slow bleeding
mhm,
of the Palestinian people. One of the groups who are being most victimized is the Palestinian people. Make
mhm,
no mistake here. Hamas victimizes the very people they represent every day.
mhm.
But the longer this drags out, the longer they are victimizing the people they represent. So I think the only way this is going to end, and by the way, Biden again at the time of taping bad-mouthed Netanyahu saying, "Oh, he's not doing enough." Netanyahu's done everything he's been asked to do, to include holding back and going into Rafah. It's Hamas that's been unreasonable and not willing to make any concessions. So, at this point, since I think they've done everything they can to come halfway, that is the Israelis, they need to act on their own without regard to what the United States thinks, and just go in and finish off Hamas. They're a terrorist organization. If they had not attacked on the 7th of October, if they had not taken hostages, we would not have the situation today.
Yeah, my last question, Antonia. Thank you for all your thoughts.
Sure.
Next week, the early election started. So, is there any fear to repeat the experience of 2020 cheating, or ballot
Yeah.
meaning and all of this? Is there any danger to cheat again?
I think there's always a danger, but I think people have woken up to it. One of the biggest changes was Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg during the
Yeah.
2020 election
Mm,
enhanced, and I think that's usually, he enhanced democracy by creating all these organizations that helped state and local election committees. Well, it was all helping in one way. It was helping Democrats. So he said, "I'm not doing that this time." So that's about $40 billion off the table. So that's number one. Number two,
mm,
uh, I think there are indicators that the conditions that COVID created, that is to say, this ability to mail in votes and without regard to being precise is over too. For example, I live in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't count a vote by midnight on election night, it can't be counted. So you got to get it in, and you got to
Yeah.
have it counted before midnight. So that ends the nonsense that can happen after midnight to the next morning. So I think a lot of folks have recognized that these things happen. And yes, I do believe there was huge, I've said this publicly, there were huge violations of election law and cheating by the left during the 2020 campaign. But I think a lot of folks have now gotten ahead of it.
Yeah.
I think it'll be close in certain states, but I think the chances are I think this is going to look a lot more like 2016 than 2020 in the
Yeah.
end. So
That's we hope so. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you
thank
and
you, Maria.
thoughtful
Good
comment.
joining you. Thanks for having me. Thank you.